Hold on, getting that ready. Okay, Supervisor Gore, here we go. 3, 2, 1, go.
Hola, muy buenas tardes. Yo me llamo James Gore. Soy un supervisor aquí
Good
en el
afternoon. This is James Gore. I'm a supervisor here at the county in the 4th District.
Supervisor. I represent the 4th District. It's a pleasure to have you here today. Bueno, el objeto de este evento es
The
ayudar a
objective of this event is to help Latinx residents understand the importance of their preparation for a disaster and to become familiar with the resources we have here in the county for you.
in English. Tonight's event is really to help understand what the resources for the county and how we do our best to put ourselves in the best situation to be prepared for disaster. Para todos ustedes, este programa,
This program and the intention of it is to have it in Spanish and to provide interpretation into English instead of the usual, which is what we are used to do, which is to do the programs in English and interpret into Spanish. But we wanted to show our respect to the Latino community and to provide our support to you by providing this presentation in Spanish. People who don't have access or need information about the interpretation need to click on the globe on the bottom of your screen, on your Zoom screen, and choose the option of Spanish or English. In case you need to, the Zoom link is in the Facebook chat. Nancy, who's in charge of this meeting, has published it when we started the meeting. So we'd like to go ahead. I'd like to introduce my colleague, Susan Gorin, supervisor.
Hola, buenas tardes. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Susan Gorin. I am the 1st District Supervisor for Sonoma County. I represent Eastern Santa Rosa down through Sonoma Valley to San Pablo Bay. Thank you for joining us tonight. We will be able to take as many questions as possible. And if you could go to the upper right of your screen or wherever your chat is, you can enter your questions as we go along. Also, there is a function to ask your questions over Facebook. Again, thank you so much for being here.
Ahora sí. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias a todos. Como para empezar la presentación.
Thank you to everyone. To start the presentation, I would like to invite Melissa Valle. She is the director of the Office of Equity from Sonoma County, and she is going to help us to learn what we need to do. Melissa?
Supervisor Gore, estamos.
Thank you, Supervisor Gore. We're very grateful to be here representing the Office of Equity, which was created last year. Right now, we are working on 2 important initiatives for the community. creating a language access plan. And the other project is very important in terms of disaster response and preparation, and that is working with the Emergency Management Department and to put into practice Law SB 660, which requires cultural competency in emergency responses in the counties of California. This implies that we are going to be working with a community council to bring diverse communities that we have here in Sonoma County to listen to and include them in this emergency plan. This is something very important for the County of Sonoma to include all communities. Since we have disasters every year, this is very important to do this work together. And the Office of Equity will be working closely with the Department of Emergency Management in order to create this community advisory board. We're going to work together to communicate with our communities. And for those who are watching this at home and who work in organizations who'd like to join us in this process, which we haven't started yet, but we plan to start in the next few months, we would like to invite you to write us at equity@sonoma/ or dash county.org or spd@sonoma.org. So you can tell us if you'd like to participate to create this group with you. So I don't want to go past my time. I know there'll be questions, but that's our emphasis at this time in terms of preparations for emergencies.
Gracias, Melissa Valle.
Thank you,
Now-
Melissa Valle.
Now, it's my pleasure to introduce Oscar Chavez. He is the Assistant Department Director for Human Services. Oscar?
Oscar, no te escuchamos.
Pastor, no te oigo.
Ahora sí, ahora sí. Bueno, muchas gracias. Mi nombre es
Thank
Oscar
you
Chávez.
so much. My name is Oscar Chavez. I'm the Deputy Director for Human Services. I would like to share information about the evacuation shelters. During emergency times, our department is responsible for maintaining and opening the shelters. And during these emergencies, we send our workers to operate these shelters during the period of the emergency. Due to the fact that we are still dealing with COVID, the county will establish temporary evacuation points to lead the residents seeking shelter to the appropriate shelters. So first they come to these temporary locations, and then they are sent, depending on their situation, to the appropriate shelter. These shelters and these evacuation points are safe to help evacuees during the evacuation period. Strict rules for social distancing are practiced. We take all necessary measures to protect the security of the evacuees and the workers who are working in the shelters. This includes spacing the beds where people sleep, providing prepackaged foods, requiring the use of masks and regular cleaning to ensure that we can protect everyone who is in the shelter. The evacuees will have access to resources and social support services provided by the many community organizations that we work with. And all the evacuees will have bilingual workers to guarantee that we can meet the needs of the monolingual Spanish speakers. If you need support in other languages, we will contract with providers to make sure that we can communicate with people in their preferred language. I'd like to assure our community that all immigrants are welcome in the centers. You're not going to be asked if you have documentation. We want everyone to feel safe and to know that this place is here for you to help you during an emergency. All these shelters are also equipped to support people with functional needs and access needs. And if you need extra support, we have a team of social workers and medical personnel who can decide what is the best way to support the evacuees. Our objective during the time we are managing the shelters is that everyone has a plan when it's time to leave the shelter. So we want everyone to have options. And if we don't have that help during that time period, we are going to seek organizations that can help you. So I'm going to stop there. I think there'll be time for more questions later. Thank you. Thank you, Oscar. It's always a pleasure to hear what's happening in your department and throughout the county. Now I'd like to introduce you to Clayton De Freitas. He is the Executive Director of Corazon Healdsburg. Clayton, thank you so much for coming and for taking this new position in the midst of a pandemic. It's a bit chaotic, but Corazon Healdsburg has always fought for the community, for the Latino community, and we'd love to hear what you think and what you're up to. Welcome. Thank you so much, Supervisor Gore. Thank you to all of you for inviting me. Corazon is very happy to be here. This is the first time that I'm participating in this initiative with you. As the supervisor said, I'm the new executive director of Corazon Healdsburg. But the work doesn't stop. The work is a continuation of everything that we have done in the past with some adjustments, because in the past, we have been working in a more reactive way, but now we have had a little bit more time to plan and to be more prepared to assist our community for the next emergencies. We all know that because of our geographic location and all bunch of different reasons, we always have to be ready for the next emergency. But as Corazon is an institution that also has objectives to take care of the community in the long term, we offer services to the community in 4 different areas. And our new program is one of a response to emergencies. We have the preparation phase for emergencies. We have relief for emergencies. We also have a phase of recovery, and we also have a phase of resilience. In terms of the preparation phase, we provide classes to the community, distribution of materials such as backpacks, communication plans, both internal and external, and also coordination with authorities to get resources to the community. We provide translation, everything that is needed so that all the resources reach the community. If there is an emergency, we provide support. And the way that we do this is an initial assessment to determine each family's needs, distribution of economic aid such as gift cards, gas cards, money when it's necessary, access to food, housing arrangement, basic necessities, first aid kits. We also offer emergency assistance for needs and external and internal support to provide all of these supports. Afterwards, we have the recuperation or recovery phase, which is after the emergency has passed, and we help people and families access mental health services, for example, signing up for public benefits such as CalFresh, Medi-Cal, navigation of housing needs, how they're going to find housing, recovery of documentation, passports or other documents which may have been lost, labor negotiations or work support such as CVs, interviews through our agreements. And the last phase is the resilience phase, which is focused on creating a stronger community, such as helping to support and to create community leaders through promotores, with meetings, with advisory meetings, with community conversations to deal with educational matters. We will dedicate a lot of time to reflection and evaluation on our preparation and our response so that we can keep learning with the community how our program is working and how we can improve our programs and to provide these services in a culturally relevant way. We would like all this information to be translated and interpreted to our community in a way that is culturally relevant and appropriate for the different populations within our community. So in summary, we have these 4 areas of that Corazon Healdsburg provides starting this year, which we are already implementing.
Thank you very much.
Gracias. Thank you so much to everyone at Corazon Healdsburg. It's my pleasure to introduce the next panelist, Alma Bowen. She serves as Executive Director of Nuestra Comunidad. Alma, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. It's always exciting to have the opportunity to speak to the community about disaster preparedness. Es un placer estar aquí. Me da mucha alegría poder hablar con la
It's a
comunidad
pleasure to be here and speak with the community
sobre cómo prepararse uno para
about how
desastres.
to prepare.
I have always felt that disaster preparedness is a cultural shift, not a one-time deal. It has to be ongoing messaging and efforts that occur within the community. We have to build systems during sunny times because really in Sonoma County, we've learned that our little sunny times or blue sky days are becoming less and less. And even during times that we used to kind of sit back and think, okay, we have a few months before we have to really be diligent. As we're seeing now, that is not the case. Nuestra Comunidad has always been focused on offering disaster preparedness to vulnerable populations, in particular our Latino population, and also our seniors and, just our most vulnerable population. So right now it's kind of an interesting time. And I say that in the sense that we're almost a year into COVID. And as we've learned the hard way, and if we've learned from the beginning, is that our Latinx community has been more disproportionately impacted than any other community. And that also shows itself during disaster times. And it needs to be part of our policy when we're building disaster response systems. So in the United States, the Latinx comprise 63% of limited English proficiency population, yet only 12% of the English proficient population. So that right there creates language barriers that will become a factor during any of the phases of disaster response, disaster recovery, the disaster cycle. So one of the things that we've learned is that when it comes to wildfires, our farm workers are especially vulnerable. They work in conditions that are difficult, often not having access to N95 masks or the equipment that they need, not having a plan, not knowing what to do. And then on top of that, we have a lot of community members that are in fear of their status of immigration and how that could play out during a disaster. So they even become more vulnerable because the systems we do have in place to help them, a lot of them are afraid to use those systems and they fear repercussion. And so in disaster response, it's really important to take a layered approach. We have to think about translating the materials, making sure that it's accessible at all times. And this includes training material as well as response material, as well as anything we're offering in shelters or in any site that's represented by government with bicultural, bilingual workers that the community can identify with walking through that door. To me, it's in what I said earlier, it's a unique but exciting time. I feel like we have the opportunity here to really make a change in how we as a community respond and carry through everybody that is part of our community. So with Nuestra Comunidad, we remain focused on disaster preparedness. We're still administering the Listos California program, even though the funding, a lot of that has died out, it hasn't been renewed, but we have the material. And one of the things I like about the Listos disaster preparedness is that it's a model that we can use for any situation. It's largely based on simple language and a lot of pictures. And that is just really helpful in reaching population. It makes it easier for people that have different literacy levels, but also it makes it more approachable and less daunting to people that are first-time thinkers in approaching disaster preparedness. Because we've had multiple disasters here in Sonoma County, I think as a community, we are moving towards disaster preparedness a lot more because it's a real situation that we've all faced here. So I really look forward to what that looks like. I look forward to our local government agencies working with our CBOs and our nonprofits, with community groups, with community leaders. I believe that a multi-layer approach is going to be the best approach. And as Nuestra Comunidad, we are here to support and help the community and other organizations. I have put my contact information and organization information in the chat. If you're interested in trainings, I'm going to start doing more digital trainings. And it's really important to keep in mind that if we're truly trying to reach all of our community members, especially our limited English proficiency, and we're talking Spanish speakers, but also our indigenous populations that speak multiple dialects and different, languages, doing videos, short videos that we put on different platforms is a really good way to reach community members. And so, this is a great platform. I'm glad that we're launching it on Facebook. There's actually a lot of people that use Facebook and they're able to share this. Another great option is a YouTube channel. You don't need to have access. You don't need to sign up. Anybody can look up YouTube. Sometimes people don't subscribe to Facebook, but they will use YouTube. So I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to learn and contribute. And if you have any questions, please reach out to me via email, phone, our website. You're able to leave a message there. So thank you very much.
Bueno, muchas gracias, Alma. Yo puedo decir fuertemente.
Thank you very much, Alma. I can definitely say that you have been a key part of our community after the fires since 2017. The work you have been doing has been extremely important. And the best thing is that you are always working on capacity building for the community. Now, Rosario Rodriguez, next person I'm going to be introducing, is the next person who is also a pleasure to have here with us. She's the director of a group called Sonoma County Community Organizations Active in Disaster. This organization came to life after the fires of 2017. They are a place where many different organizations come together to share resources with the community. So, Rocio, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you. And it's such a pleasure also to be here and to be with all this really wonderful company. I first wanted to say that my approach to emergency response is very communal. And I think that's very reflective of our community and how we think of family, not only as our parents, our brothers or sisters, our grandparents, but also our cousins friends, our aunts, our uncles, like everybody that encompasses this community. And I think of COAD similarly, that it is not just the people in your immediate family, but everybody who is involved in the systems of emergencies. So COAD stands for Community Organizations Active in Disaster. We are a coalition of nonprofits, faith-based organizations, and community-based organizations. And we also have community partners and other partners who support our work. And again, it's a coalition. So we really try to facilitate cooperation, communication, coordination, and collaboration. And then the fifth C that is starting to slowly come out more, but compassion. Compassion is always there, but we don't mention it as one of our C's. So I'm starting to speak more about it because that really is the driving force of a lot of the work here. So we really work in during disaster mitigation, during disaster preparedness, response, and recovery. So the folks here have spoken about a lot of that. And so they're really the ones that are on the ground doing this work, the ones who are working with clients, the ones who are doing these trainings, these educational sessions. COAD tries to help facilitate, share that information. And that's really during blue sky times, as Alma was saying. When we are activated during an emergency, then we are activated to go to the Emergency Operations Center. And that's really where a lot of the work happens through the county. That's where a lot of decision-making is made. That's when a lot of the communication happens on the ground with the firefighters, police, with logistics, trying to figure out which streets do we need to block off? How do we communicate to the public what is happening? And COAD being there is such a big piece of having that community voice. And it's very, very new. We've only been in there about a year. And it gives the opportunity for the community to express their, or give feedback. So Alma could call me up and say, hi, I heard from some folks that they're missing translators at this shelter. Can we get somebody there? So I can take that message back to the county personnel, and then we can try to figure out those resources or we can help allocate them. And we have great, wonderful partners who were able to do and make that big push as well in the fires and during and after the flooding as
Se
well.
dio durante los incendios. También
The shelters try to coordinate organizations that can go and share resources at the shelters, do referral services, give out gas cards like Clayton was saying, and try to help connect people to those resources. So after the fire is done, or even during an emergency or after an emergency, they can be linked up with resources to help support them. During COVID, it's interesting to see because this is a constant emergency. We're constantly needing help. We're constantly giving help. And then after disaster is done, we'll also be in the local assistance centers, which are set up to also provide that information, those resources as a one-stop shop where people can go for the county resources. So getting paperwork replaced, trying to get connected to the DMV, to other resources that are in the county system. And then we also have nonprofits who will sit there as well and also do some of that other service referrals and support as well. And then overall, always constantly communicating and collaborating with our community organizations in the county. So if you are part of an organization that is interested in getting more involved, there is a lot of great work that is being done right now, a lot of trainings that are being put up. Alma, again, I'm keep referring to Alma because we work together. She's on our steering committee. But for example, Alma's work, she's wants to go to your organization or to your group and be able to present that information. And then being a part of COAD puts you in as part of this larger network of organizations. So you can be part of this community as well and help support and create that resiliency for the community. And we also have a website that you can also go to for more information to connect with us. And that is Sonoma County COAD, COAD.org. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Rocio from COAD.
Thank you, Rocio from COAD. Thank you so much.
Now, it's my pleasure to introduce my good friend,
Ahora es mi placer,
Maite Aturi, who serves as the chair of the Springs Municipal Advisory Council and principal of El Verano Elementary School. Maite, tell us what you've been doing around community preparedness.
Absolutely. Vale, gracias. Estoy muy contenta de estar aquí con ustedes.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here with you this evening. It's a pleasure to be in this group. Yes, I'm the chair of the Springs Municipal Advisory Council. This council is appointed by Supervisor Gorin, and our goal this year is to be prepared for the upcoming emergencies, because ever since 2016, there's been an emergency after emergency. If there are fires, or it could be an earthquake, and now we're in a pandemic. So I'd like to speak about 3 or 4 things that we are doing in Sonoma Valley to support the community. In Springs, the community most of the community are Latinos. We try to do everything bilingually and to respect the culture of our community. So one of the things that we're doing is an initiative que se llama Mapea tu vecindario, which is map your neighborhood, to find leaders in each neighborhood. We need leaders. We're looking for leaders who want to take responsibility to get to know their neighborhoods, who live in that neighborhood, what skills do people have in that neighborhood, and how can we work together if we have to evacuate, if we have to leave the area, if we have to help people who don't have transportation or don't have family to help them. So it's getting to know your neighbors and your neighborhood. It's also a way that we can communicate. If there's a vaccination clinic or whatever. So it's a way of spreading the word and supporting and communicating within our communities. The second thing that we're working on in the council is identifying a shelter and the supplies for that shelters in the Springs area. We have bridges because we have lots of streams, and we know that we might be cut off. We also know that it's hard to get from Santa Rosa to Sonoma Valley when there's an emergency. In 2017 and in 2020, we couldn't go through Highway 12. So we need to have our own provisions and a place that we can use as a shelter if we need it. And if people need to evacuate from their houses, or also when there's power shutoffs, there's a place where people can go to charge their phones or whatever devices they have. We are working with the school district in Sonoma Valley to choose a place that will function as a shelter, such as a school, to designate as a shelter. The third thing that we're working on is the Fire Safe Council, which will help direct all of this work. There are people from the community who are part of a class. They can receive scholarships to support these programs. So we are working on these 3 things to prepare ourselves for the next emergency. And then the last one, the other program that I wanted to mention is Food for All. This started during the pandemic, in March. We started because people did not have access to get to the food distribution centers. So we started bringing food to people's houses because there were a lot of people who don't drive, who don't have a way to get to the food distribution centers. So we started helping bring food to people's houses. The other thing that we started doing in this program is that when people take the COVID test and are positive, we bring them food at home so that they don't have to go out. We call them stay-at-home boxes so they can stay at home. So these are the 4 things that we're working on during this emergency period. Thank you so much for giving me the time. I'm delighted to be here with you this evening, and thank you to all of you for the work that you're doing in the community to support our community. Thank you so much. Thank you, Maite. It's a pleasure to have you here. We need community support in all the communities, especially those communities that aren't cities, that aren't incorporated into the city. There's no representatives that are directly elected. So it's very important to have you part of it. Now I'd like to introduce you to Jeffrey Hoffman. He's the leader of legal assistance, rural legal assistance. Jeffrey, it's a pleasure to have you here with us. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Gore. And I wanted to also thank the organizers of this excellent event for inviting us. It's a very important and timely program. I'm the directing attorney for California Rural Legal Assistance in Santa Rosa. And CRLA, as we're known, is a nonprofit legal aid program that has been serving low-income rural communities throughout California for the past over 50 years. What I wanted to do, I hope this works, I'm not a technical person, but I'm gonna see if I can put up a information sheet as to how to contact our organization. If not, that doesn't work, I'll go ahead and just provide the info to you, but let's see what happens. Okay, well, CRLA in Santa Rosa has been providing assistance since 1967 to low-income persons. You can see there our contact information. You can reach us by phone or through our website. As well, I wanted to include a hotline number that we have available for workers who have questions related to their work and COVID-19, maybe benefits issues and other information like that, that number you can call for information and help. So CRLA's mission is to fight for justice and individual rights alongside the most exploited communities of our society. And as I said, we've been providing legal assistance to low-income persons in Santa Rosa office in Sonoma County since 1967. And we also provide assistance to farm workers throughout Northern California. Our staff provides legal assistance and representation in legal matters, and we also do community education and outreach services. We'll come and talk to groups of people about your rights on various topics. And we provide our services in English, Spanish, and in Triqui, which is an indigenous language spoken by folks from Oaxaca, Mexico. Our legal services that we provide are focused on protection of labor rights, defense of tenants and their rights, including housing discrimination, improving access to health services and public benefits, ensuring equal access to education for students and youth, and also enforcement of civil rights. And CRLA has provided assistance to the community on a variety of issues following the disasters. We have provided Know Your Rights materials and presentations. We have done legal clinics, free legal clinics on different issues such as insurance rights. The issues that we focused on for disasters have been insurance issues, housing issues, including substandard conditions, price gouging, evictions, and also on government benefits, including FEMA claims, and labor issues such as worker safety in a disaster, worker preparedness for disasters, issues such as wage theft and other unfair labor practices. in doing our work, we've been fortunate that we're able to work with a network of both nationwide, statewide, and local providers that have helped us and worked with us to provide what I call disaster legal services. This includes the California Disaster Legal Collaborative, which has a website, disasterlegalserviceca.org, the National Low Income Housing Coalition, which provides assistance on a nationwide basis. We've worked also with Legal Aid of Sonoma County, which has provided a lot of disaster assistance as well. There's a lot of issues. I was asked to see if I could touch on one point that I thought was important. I know our time is limited, and there are so many different issues that come up related to a disaster. I think you could maybe I was thinking that our community is probably so experienced, we could be providing trainings all over to everybody about the issues and how to respond. We're very experienced as a community, I think. I sort of divide the issues into different categories, such as providing for your own safety and the safety of your family, protecting your property and your property rights and getting your property restored, and also seeking out and getting government benefits, and such as FEMA benefits or other types of benefits that might be available, including insurance benefits. And in fact, I wanted to just mention a few things about insurance, because I think if I really think about it, I think that's the one issue that probably cuts across all the different categories. And so if I were to pick one issue in terms of disaster preparedness, I would mention being able to have sufficient insurance to cover you against losses of property. And I think that would include insurance for homeowners as well as for renters. And I think that, in the work that we've done, I think lack of insurance or insufficient insurance coverage was a big factor in terms of the issues that came up I've seen in our work that we've done after the fires. So having sufficient insurance, whether as a renter or a homeowner, is extremely important to assure that you can be made whole again in terms of loss of property. And it also, I think, an important part of insurance that maybe doesn't get mentioned as much, but is that insurance can also help you in having a place to go until you can get back on your feet. That's called additional living expenses or loss of use coverage. So if you have to be out of your residence for whatever reason, you can be put up in a hotel and have your insurance cover that. Now, FEMA does provide some assistance when it does apply, but FEMA can be limited in the type of assistance that it does apply or does provide. So again, insurance is really very important. And given that we've had, it seems like almost every year, where the wildfires are becoming more common. It's important to be aware of, number one, whether you have or should have insurance, and also what is the level of your insurance coverage, and is it going to cover what you need to have it covered? And related to that, I think what's important is having an inventory of your property, which is important to have when you're getting insurance. And even separate from insurance, I think just in preparing for a disaster, I think it's important to have a really good inventory of all your property. So then when necessary, you can go back and keep track of what you need to replace in the future. In terms of looking at your policy, I just advise that you check your policy to see what kind of coverage you have. You can look at your declarations page, which sort of is a summary of your coverage. It might be, and then you look at other provisions that might be added in addition to the main coverage that's in the declarations page. And you might need to get more coverage. It might cost a little, but it might be worthwhile in the long run. Again, what we saw over and over, especially for homeowners, is that people were underinsured, and the property values go up, the costs of repairing go up. So it's good to check on that and continue to upgrade your coverage. Be aware of what is or isn't coverage. And you can do that in terms of the square footage of your property and figure out what value of square footage, how many square feet your property is, what the value is that might be allowed based on that square footage. One other note about insurance, it's a big topic. I could go on for hours maybe discussing it. But generally, at least not without getting special coverage, flooding and earthquakes are not always covered. And it may be worth it to check into getting special coverage for flooding and earthquakes, especially if you're in an area maybe along the river, or you have a creek or other areas where you think there might be flooding. And I wanted to mention renter's insurance. I really wanted to strongly emphasize that everyone should get renter's insurance if you're a renter. It's not that expensive, and it can really help assure that you can be covered against losses or be able to be put up in a hotel or have other places to go temporarily if necessary. I've heard that the average cost for renter's insurance is about $15 a month. And really that's not too bad for a lot of people to be able to afford, and it can be a big benefit. I wanted to just put out for basic insurance questions that you might have, there's an organization called United Policyholders. They've come and done presentations in our community, uphelp.org. It's a really good website where you can find out information and get help with questions about insurance and about disaster preparedness. I recommend you check out
de
that.
desastres y se los recomiendo.
I think for now, that's all I had to say. I'd be glad to answer questions that may come up. And again, thank you very much for inviting us.
Bueno, Jeffrey, muchas gracias. Antes de ir a las...
Thank you, Jeffrey, very much. Before we go to some questions, I would like to say that in 2017, the fire was huge. I mean, it hit us. More than 5,000 houses were destroyed. Many people who were renting and had no insurance were seriously affected. And our goal was to never live that again, to leave that behind. So the saying after those days became Sonoma Strong, Sonoma Fuerte. We changed very much to this idea of being ready. So now it's Sonoma Listo, Sonoma Ready. And from Sonoma Ready, we want to be now Sonoma Seguro, Sonoma Safe. And us as supervisors and everyone working here is committed to changing policies when it comes to preparing to make sure that we'll be ready for anything that may come our way, earthquakes, fires, pandemics, flooding. There's a lot of work ahead of us, but nothing can happen without commitment, work ahead by the community. Working with the government, NGOs, and so forth, is work that cannot take place without the will of the community, of each person from the community. So it's a pleasure for me to be here with you. And I would like to take a look at some of the questions that we have here for today. First, there was one question, Melissa, for you from Jorge. I thought it was from Jorge, but it was about the committee that you mentioned. I don't remember exactly which committee that was. Perhaps he was writing, just saying that he had participated with that before, since we were, but now talking about disasters or fires, or perhaps as a, we can talk about the, what we have as a policy in terms of COVID. You know, I think Lorena was the one that asked. Yes, I did see it. And yes, any person, regardless of their language, they can participate as part of the group and the community council and about the SBS 160. And the answer is yes, it's extremely important for everyone who would like to participate, who represents an organization, who are part of small communities who are typically not in contact with the government, for them to participate and for us to be able to bring them to the table, as it's said in English, so that we can talk and for us to keep you involved in the process. Also, if we cannot break the language barrier, then we'll set up an additional time for some meeting. We'll bring an interpreter. So if we cannot do that now, we won't be able to do it during emergency time. So we have to get ready now and close any spaces for errors or danger. So again, equidad at equity at sonomacounty.org, so that we can come together and further establish this group. And as Supervisor Gore mentioned, we have been working very closely with the Latinx work group on health, which has helped us center or direct our response to, I mean, the COVID response to our community, but also including indigenous peoples, which are often not included as part of the government work. So they have been seriously affected too. And we have been talking to many people at different levels who see the reality in our communities. And we are talking with them very openly, very honestly about what's happening to the community out there. And that's the type of communication or conversation we would like to have in this in this group with throughout the community, to make sure that the answer to or the response to emergencies is culturally appropriate, so that we can understand how our community communicates and how we can bring them in and create connections between us and them. Something very important to keep in mind also about our work, about the work of the emergency department, is that the goal of the department is to contact everyone who's out here at the time of an emergency, regardless of whether they live here or they could be a tourist. They can come from other country. We want them to be safe within our community. And that's what matters most, because us as an equity office would like to have everyone, particularly the most vulnerable, to be safe, which is why this work is so important. And therefore, the major invitation that we do to the community, to people like Rocio, Alma, and others who are here present, Clayton, Maite, and everyone who's interested, not just here, but everyone outside who is watching us. Again, if you like to participate, just, or if you can't, nominate someone else. By the way, this is a blind spot for you and there's no representation here. We are open, not just to bring the community to the table, but also find ways to resolve any challenges that we have, to communicate and find the response, the answer, the way to move forward, as the Supervisor Gore was mentioning. Not just to be ready, but also get to a point where we're sure, because we have built the connections, we have built what we need to communicate and to be sure and safe as a community.
Excelente, Melissa. Quiero también, como tenemos otras preguntas que yo voy a revisar.
Excellent, Melissa. And there's some other questions that I'm checking here, so I would like to ask some of you that perhaps already presented to help us with the presentation. So Oscar, something that you have done during every disaster that we have faced here over the years is to check the work in terms of other services. So how we're moving forth in terms of the refuge centers, the shelters, and there has been progress. But in 2017, we faced problems though, in terms of how to treat Spanish speakers there. If there was an opportunity for them to have access to translation and other services for them. So how do we manage this currently, and what are we going to do to manage this in the future? Red Cross is typically the one that has been at the forefront of this, but what have we been doing? Can you please tell us a little bit about that? Because, I mean, do people feel safe in that sense? Now, how about undocumented individuals? Can they go in, or do they get harmed if they go into a shelter? Because a shelter is supposed to be a safe place, right? Yeah, yes, Supervisor, that's a very good question. And after the 2017 disasters, we had to reevaluate the way in which we were managing the shelters. And yes, we had problems of access to language or language access, not having enough services available at that time. You might remember there were many people who were afraid of immigration services coming and pick up people from the shelters. And they were, again, very afraid. And we didn't have COAD, we didn't have Rocio's organization. They're working, so we can work with them to make sure that we let people know, as well as Almas, just to let them know that these shelters are places where they'll be safe. They need not be afraid. But we have to work a lot with these organizations. We have had to work throughout the years to make sure that people feel comfortable, trusting. So we instituted or established trainings also. Thus, the personnel, it's training different workers on these shelters for managers. And every 6 months, every year, we have trainings to make sure that we know how to respond when needed. Now, with COVID, we had to implement new procedures to make sure that people did not put themselves in risk of getting COVID. And now working ahead of time, preparing before disasters, that is part of the work that we are incorporating to what we do. So all workers within our department go through some training in which we make sure too that in the shelters there are enough Spanish speakers that are able to help or help people with disabilities or any additional assistance they may need. We have learned a lot, but I believe that with the continued support of our community and the organizations that work with us, we can still improve this project. Again, we have learned a lot, but this is work in progress. Together, we'll make sure that we can push forth ahead of these disasters. Thank you very much, Oscar. Jeffrey, I don't know if you can hear me with the interpretation here. Something else is resources, right? That's one side. Another one is defending someone who needs support, and that's why you're here with us, and thank you very much. Now, during a disaster, or now, right, such as the one that we're living through with COVID, many people need support in terms of what are my rights? What are my rights if I'm undocumented? Where can I get information? And you reviewed what's on the website and so forth, but can you tell us directly about how a person can go into your office, and how can they go behind and find out what they can do themselves, what they can do about their rights, but not just about what you do in the day-to-day in terms of activities?
Okay, thank you. Yes. So our organization, we are working remotely, but we are still functioning pretty much the same as we always have. You can reach us by phone, and by calling us, you can get set up to have an interview, have an attorney review your questions. Our staff is also trained on community resources that are out there. So you should call anytime you think that you might have a legal question. And no matter what the question is, and I know we are limited on we can't handle every single legal question that might come up or every single question, but we will try to refer you or provide you with different resources, phone numbers and other resources in the community where you can get help. On our website and through, I believe, our Facebook site as well, we have done videos to provide information on different issues such as worker rights, housing and eviction defense, government benefits, and other types of claims that you can make. Those videos are in English, Spanish, and different indigenous languages such as Mixteco, Triqui, and other languages. And so I think that's the best way would be just to start, I think, by calling us. If you have a COVID-related issue and you're a worker, you can call our hotline and they'll talk to you about if you tested positive and you have to quarantine, what are your rights for benefits? If someone else has in the workplace, or you're concerned about the fact that the workplace maybe isn't doing what they should to keep it safe, there's different routes you can go, different rights that you have, and we can help you navigate that, whether you need to file a complaint, whether you need to write a letter. We have sample letters that we give people that they can do it themselves, or we can write letters. I don't know if that's getting to the question, but the main point I wanted to make is that we are open and you can call us to get assistance, just like you could have before the pandemic, and we're able to help. And again, don't be afraid or think it's a dumb question, or maybe you're not sure if it's legal or not, or maybe we can't help, or you don't have papers, so you're not sure if we can help. I think whatever your situation, it's better. I always say you should call and try to get help. And we are available live on the phone, 9 to 5 every day. You won't, for the most part, you won't get an answering machine. You will get somebody, a live person, and we will call you back, with further information. That may take a day or two, depending. We're getting a lot of calls, as you might imagine. I think it's interesting, even though we're not in the office, we're getting almost more calls and doing more work than we were before the pandemic. So anyway, I hope that helps a little. And again, our website,
thank you very much, Jeffrey.
Go by email.
Muchas gracias. Perfect. Alma Bowen, and then afterwards, I'm going to ask Clayton to weigh in too. Alma, necesitaría seguir hablando en español. Olvidé, soy un gringo todavía.
Sorry, I forget to switch languages. Alma, many people don't know that in 2017, you were at the 911 office responding to the chaos that was taking place at the community. And your goal after that was to put all your effort, all your education, your will to help the community prepare all throughout. I would like to hear directly your opinion about with the Latinx community. How are things? How's it going? Is it difficult? Is it something that you have been working alongside other organizations, churches? Are we progressing at the same level as white people's communities or organizations such as me? So I think I find that as something important. You know, it's true. The experience when the 2017 fires took place, I was 18 years of that I had been an operator of a 911 service here in Sonoma County. That day, on the line, what I heard were thousands of calls from residents from the county, not only English speakers, but also from Spanish speakers. And what I heard was panic, confusion, stories of horror. People did not know what to do. And that I'm talking about the entire community. There were tons of losses. In Fountain Grove, for example, we lost many houses in Wicked Larfield and many different areas. But what I heard that night was a panic of people that did not have a plan, did not know what to do, and had never thought about this situation ahead of time. And what happens is our mind is a muscle, just like our arms, like our legs. And what we need to do is to train them to practice what we're going to do so that we have that muscle memory. Because when it comes a time when we panic, we don't think like any normal time. Now I'm at ease. I can think of details. But when I am panicking, and or in an emergency time, I don't react the same way. And that I learned this night. Everyone was affected by the disaster. However, recovery is different based on the community, each member of the community. Therefore, our community members, our Latino community members, faced many more problems when it came to recovery. Many of them had no insurance. They had many were renting, and they didn't know that they could have renters insurance. They thought that if they were landowners, that's the only time that they could have insurance. People who went to shelters to and seeking help also did not find the resources that they needed. Many of the shelters did not have the language access or resources how to connect them with services, and then they got scared. And what happens in the Latinx community is that the word of someone they trust is what matters most. So if they arrived at a shelter and they didn't have an answer, they just tell other people or the rest of the community, and that's it, and no one else comes. So many people stopped going, or because they had gone to one shelter, and again, they already knew, they felt comfortable there. And what we need to know is that trust must be built and kept throughout our organizations, with the government, with the county. And that is something that over time, we need to know who our allies are. Supervisor Gore, daily, you show yourself as an ally of the community. And that helps the community to trust you, to feel more trusting in you, because it's not just about saying I'm here to serve you, but it's different when you come and you actually show that you are taking them into account, that you respect that segment of the community. Because there are many times, and I have been in some places, that they say that they want to help, but they come out and say something that that they have no idea how to respect the people that they have in front of them. So as soon as something like that happens, people stop listening, because no one wants to feel disrespected because of their status, of their condition, immigration status, their origin. Thus, one of the biggest lessons is that people must treat everyone with respect from the start, and for everyone to feel respected, for their language, for their culture to be respected. Once we cross that major barrier, I believe that a lot of change is going to take place. Even though I'm a Latina and much of my effort is to connect with other community groups of other Latinos, still it took me a while. At first, I used to ask for permission to ask to present, because I kept bugging and I kept asking, and thus I was given the opportunity. But I noticed that the first time I was being watched. If I was sincere, if I was honest in what I was offering, and most importantly, what I was trying to get from them. But once they realized that I wanted to associate with them, in that I valued their opinion truly, and I would ask them questions, because offering a service is not just about offering it or offering information, but also to learn from those people so that we can learn how to best use the information to do our work better. I know that there's always an opportunity to ask questions, to for me, for them to give me advice too, because I need to learn what I am doing well for the community and what things I need to do better. And I believe it's something that all of us need to learn. We are not in a position, we don't know everything. It's important to know and to listen to the people that we serve.
Te quiero mucho. Eres como un
I
refugio en nuestra comunidad.
I love you very much. You're like a lighting of energy in our community. And yes, it's important to react, to prepare. You're an example moving forward. In the first fires, the impact was so high for those who lost houses, lost their things. They didn't know what to do. But afterwards, your organization, 2 years later, in Kincaid, in the Kincaid fire, Corazon arrived at the evacuation centers with different programs, because we could see that for a change to take place, you need to prepare better, send more information. So the impact of 40% of our community that has no work, doesn't have the ability to stay at home. Many times it was not very close to the fire, but we still needed to leave enough room open for the firemen and police to do their emergency work in. But the organization arrived there to give funds and give gift cards and other things. And the first time I noticed the impact, the secondary effect of this, and of people who were affected by it as a second hand, also how they were being helped. So that's a new normal now. There were many interruptions to our lives. So if the food goes bad when you're evacuated, we need to think how we need to prepare our work for, as organizations, for what people need, in a society that is facing all these interruptions. So that's what I wanted to bring up. Corazon and what Corazon has been doing, and Rocio, in like Rocio and Corazon, we have several organizations that are doing this kind of work too. Thank you for the question, and the answer has a lot to do with what Alma was mentioning, and I believe that Corazon was very successful within this process of rebuilding and of helping the community to rebuild and to continue support at a longer planning, and to identify the need to be ready for whatever need that may arise. And that requires to work closely with the community. This is very demanding. And by this, I don't mean to listen to them, but also to bring the community to help us also to plan this work. One of the initiatives that we had and that we will continue having is working with the leadership, a community leadership group as part of the planning, and to help understand what questions need to be asked, what type of individuals and families, what are the barriers that they face in terms of not having access to a given resource that may not be scarce. So some resources are scarce, but Northern California is rich in comparison with, say, ones in areas in Latin America. So we have resources, but how we utilize available resources, how can we remove the access to said resources? Emergency. When an emergency takes place, we know that initially, when we went past that initial phase, now we need to rebuild the community. We know that many individuals are unemployed by that point and don't have an income, a source of income. So the idea is not just to arrive with money to be given to a person, but no, the idea is to understand what are the barriers that each person is facing when it comes to access to work, to food, to health, and to work within that framework, because intervention can be minimum. You don't need a lot of resources to intervene and to break down that barrier. Again, working together with that individual, with the families, with the community to remove those barriers, to make sure that person grows within the community, develops within the community. Another example, a basic example, an objective one, simple interventions for reconstruction to help industries that may need to hire employees and then find the employees that need to work in that industry. So connect them, make sure that we help them build their resume, their CV, help a person improve their technical abilities or language skills so they can find a job that is available within the county. Something else. Instead of just giving food at the food bank, what alternatives do we have with food producers, local ones, to show someone, to teach someone how to have access in a more dignified way at a longer term? That work demands a lot of effort, a lot of time, a lot of trust that's built with the community. But if we don't do that, if we don't do that effort, any initiative from the county, from the government, will not be sustainable, because we do not have the available resources that are going to cover or meet all the needs of the community. Thus, we have to be creative. We have to bring him to be front and center of the discussions. Again, those individuals. And to do that, we need to communicate with them. We need to build or establish a close and long-term relationship with them. And that is what Corazon is doing, or continues doing. And that's what we believe is the best way to do this, through the individual, through several different ways of intervening with them, interventions. Thank you very much. I will reply in English because I don't feel very comfortable in Spanish.
So with preparedness at the organizational level, there's a couple, and I'll take it looking at it that way because of the COADs, where COAD is placed. But there are several things that organizations can do, and also businesses, to get ready. There is a continuity of operation plan, or there are continuity of operation plan trainings. COAD is actually has just released the application for organizations to apply if they have been engaged in community preparedness and response. and recovery. So that's one way that folks can get involved. There are other organizations that also have those type of trainings, and they provide you with a template where you can actually work on it. And actually, maybe I should explain what a COOP plan is, but it's a way that it's a format for you to design what you will do in an emergency. Let's say you provide childcare, and you work from 9 to 5, and you always take care of 18 children in this space. What happens when a fire happens? So you have to consider how you change your business model and what you do day to day. Same thing with social services. You provide food resources at the food bank from this time to this time on these days, but an earthquake happened. So what will you do to adjust how you provide services, but also will you change the services that you provide to be different? So some organizations will do that. Well, they'll switch from their normal services that they provide to something else to fit the gaps and the needs that we know will happen during an emergency. Another great thing too is engaging the community. And I think folks here have already touched on that, how when you're doing your program planning, when you're talking about resiliency, you really want to include the community in your projects, and not just including them for a focus group or including them because in advertising, but including them in actually planning your projects or planning the services that you will provide, actually making them a part of it as the team that's creating it, because it's going to be their community that will be receiving those services. And then the other thing as well is getting to know the other resources too. We have a subcommittee of food providers, and I always think about this. And of course, whichever group you're a part of, you're going to think about those services, but we really encourage those food providers to also think about what other services are being offered, so that when you're doing that person-to-person interaction, when you're actually delivering the food, if somebody says, I also don't have diapers and I don't have, right now we're talking a lot about like Lysol, if I don't have those resources, where can I go? And then that food provider can say, I know exactly where to lead you to. So also kind of creating that resiliency too, where we can support and share resources together.
Bueno, muchas gracias. Maite.
Thank you very much, Maite. Perhaps you can help us for a few minutes before we finish, Melissa, talking about language justice. So I'm gonna put two questions forth in this regard. Maite, you said a word that I love, which is involving or involucrar. It sounds to me better in Spanish than in English, but it sounds stronger to me. How do we work? How do we need to work? Like in my case, I am a gringo. So what should we do as an ally, as an accomplice of the community? Because many people think to bring the Latinx community together, the Latinos are the ones that need to do the work. But it's also our work, the ones who have the privilege to help. So what are you doing to get others involved within your goals? Good question. It's something that this is difficult, because in our environment, in the way we work or communicate with the council, it's not very comfortable for many, because it's a very formal space, and to build a relationship and to get other people involved requires more intimacy. We need to talk face to face, and now through the pandemic it's even more difficult with everything being on video, and not everyone has access to it. So during all this time we have definitely noticed that that is a major challenge to the Latino community in terms of access to the internet, to technology. So now everything's like upside down, and building those relationships is more difficult now. Face to face, on the phone, again, creating spaces for each voice, because I believe that is something that we who are in leadership positions must do, create those spaces and not take everything for granted, because we talk a lot and don't breathe. We need to let others breathe and talk, give them the opportunity to talk. And again, building that space for that. And that is something that I always try to do. Am I talking too much? Okay, it's time to shut my mouth and let others talk. And now is the time to close, shut my mouth and create that space. All right. So creating the space and doing things face to face. Okay. Now, many are asking about language justice. To have justice, 100%, that would mean that we need to do everything, not just in Spanish, but in every language that is spoken here in the county. In your office, have our support to help you to do this and find solutions, because justice is not always fast, though. It's not always easy. In reality, it never is. What do you think that we need to be thinking about in this regard? So justice is not always the fastest road ahead, but it's the right one to go on. And there are many people that not only speak Spanish, but other languages and are part of our community who live, work, study, and are the ones that make our county what it is. And so there are challenges, yes, such as sending emergency messages in all those languages when there is a fire that is hitting at 90 miles an hour. And it's something complicated. It cannot be done in a few minutes. So many things can be addressed in this regard. But what we're focusing on is that a plan of language access that identifies at which point we translate, which languages should be included, and how we're going to go about doing it. Because it's very easy to say you just need to translate it, but we need to know which departments need to do this, what kind of help is needed for recommendations to be made, so that they don't send a translation to be done by any one person, but to know that translation, it doesn't mean connection by itself. We also need to be relevant. We need to understand the community also. So it goes much further. But to get to that point, we are doing studies of what other counties are doing, Monterey County, Kern, King in Seattle. So we are analyzing how they got to the conclusion of what worked for them and how we can apply that ourselves. We are in community talks, preliminary ones, and we expect to carry out many more, so that what we do here in our office is that working in a process that will lead to a result, but the result, it's not going to be without inclusion of the communities for them to let us know what they need to see come out of this, and also what things can be done wrong and how can we get to the solution. It's a large challenge. It's a large problem, but we owe it to the community in terms of responding to the errors that have been made in terms of doing something that they can depend on. So if they know, if they join a meeting, and we want to be congruent, coherent. For example, if they know that they go to certain meetings, that there will be interpretation and which ones it would be, which ones would not be. So again, the idea is for the process to make it a part of what our institution is. So mid this year, I plan on presenting something about this, which I hope will benefit the community. You're muted. Thank you. Thank you for being a large and important component of the equity office. And yes, we need to do that because an office without the intention to push forth its and just response to emergencies, that's not the way to go. So I'd like to give the floor to my colleague Susan Gorin and about the fires, the 2017 fires. Actually, I'm not going to talk about the fires, but about the home insurance, because there's a rule that says that people who have home loans, which is just about everyone here, insurance companies say that they must have insurance. You must, because the banks own the homes, right? So of the homes that we lost, 91% had insurance. Of the ones that were renting lost homes, only 29% had insurance. So we're talking about what those people lost. We're talking about 40% of the lost houses were rented, which means that about 1,500, 2,000 families had hardly any support. And that's the other component of the preparation, not just to have a plan, but we need to know that there is a system in place that will help them. And there are many white Americans say, and they yell at us because they want the system to work perfectly, like a clock. But many Latinos, I want them to yell with the same strength that the white people do, because this is their community too. And the future is also theirs. Susan, you have the last word.
Gracias, James. Thank you all for being with us tonight. You may know that I lost my home in the fire 3.5 years ago, the Nuns fire. And so I take it very personally to be prepared personally for fires, for emergencies, to know how to prepare my family, to communicate with my family in case of an emergency, to make sure that I have my go bag ready with my list of documents and a supply of food and water for my family for a couple of days, as well as extra clothes, because I've been there and I lost just about everything in the fire. I sifted through the ashes and not much left. I really want to thank Jeffrey for telling us all how to be prepared, how to prepare for an emergency, because I feel it's not a matter of if, but when you and your family and your property may be in danger of being lost through fires or earthquakes. And you need to take this very seriously. Many of you have cell phones and you can walk around your house with your cell phone. Please do that. Take photos of every room, of every closet, of every drawer of your belongings, so that you can remember what was there before the emergency, and hopefully it will be there for you after the emergency. But I want to emphasize how important it is to be adequately insured. You'll talk with your insurance company and they will say, oh, absolutely, you're going to be insured and you're going to have insurance. And 9 times out of 10, your insurance will not be adequate to rebuild a home or to compensate you for what you've lost. So you might want to go back and review Jeffrey's slides. It's very, very important. But know that it's not just fires. It could be an earthquake that would devastate Sonoma County any day, any month. And I don't really want to unnecessarily alarm you, but it is important to be prepared. Please have a plan with your children, with your relatives. If you have to evacuate in an emergency, if you have your power go out, how are you going to reconnect with your family and your children? And Maite takes this very personally. As a principal of El Verano School, she wants to make sure that her families and her students are safe. Sonoma Valley has now been devastated by fires twice. First, the fires 3.5 years ago, and now most recently, the glass fire. It cut off the circulation along Highway 12. So when you prepare for an emergency, please note that your evacuation routes may change pretty significantly and drastically, and your communication and your transportation may change for weeks at a time while you and your families have evacuated. This is what Maite has been working on so hard as chair of the Municipal Advisory Council, and what I've been working on with her, with the county, to ensure that Sonoma Valley is prepared for an emergency. But we need for you, our Spanish-speaking community, our indigenous language community, to understand how to prepare for emergencies. And I hope that all of our incredible panelists tonight will really help you in the future to take this seriously. We are in COVID pandemic. We are closer to our families as we shelter in place. And we never expected this as an emergency, but we could have a fire during a COVID pandemic. We could have an earthquake during a COVID pandemic. So it is important to know that we live in a very different world from the world that we lived in a number of years ago, and our emergencies are happening more frequently and with more regularity every year. So Sonoma County is very prepared. You've heard from the experts who've been with us every step of the way and will continue to be here to give you the lessons and to help you respond to emergencies in the evacuation centers. But planning starts with you. So I hope that this discussion tonight has helped you. Thank you to the organizers. Thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you to my colleague, James Gore, for being with us, fluent in Spanish. My hat goes off to all of you. I'm fluent in English, maybe, but thank you. Muchas gracias para todos. And thank you so much to all of you. James, do you want to have an ending word?
Solo para decir que como este proceso
I'd like
es
to
una,
just say that this process is not one of seeking perfection, like me with my language skills. I never thought that I was going to be using my Spanish as this gringo during a time of crisis like this. And now it's what we all need to do to help our community. I'd like to tell all of you that this is an invitation to get involved, as Maite says, involucrarse in this process. Again, thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone.